to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about The Last Sontaran, written by Phil Ford and is directed by Joss Agnew. This story is the last regular appearance of Yasmin Page playing the character Maria, and it's also the last appearance of Joseph Milton playing her father, Alan Jackson. And this also features the return of the Sontarans, and is seemingly a sequel to the Doctor Who story, the Sontaran Stratagem and the Poisonous Sky, the two-parter from Series 4 of the revived series. So, right off the bat, there's a lot to talk about. It's very nice to see Elizabeth Sladen playing Sarah Jane going up against the Sontarans again. For those of you who might be a bit too young to know about like previous classic Who stories, the Time Warrior, which introduced Sarah Jane to a companion to the third Doctor, was also the story that introduced the Sontarans. So it's a very fitting duo for recurring Doctor Who monster to return to the Sarah Jane adventures. I also feel like this could be a semi-precursor to the much more light-hearted way the Sontarans have been portrayed recently in classic Who. In New Who, sorry. I messed it up. New Who. I meant to say New Who. As far as this video is recorded, Series 13 of the revived series of Doctor Who hasn't aired yet, and there are multiple rumours that the Sontarans will return for that series. So this could all change by the time that you're watching this. But as I'm recording this story is the last time the Sontarans were really taken seriously as a threat, or at least as the main antagonist. They would also appear in the finale of Series 2. This is the first episode of Series 2. The last story in this series, Enemy of the Bane, would also feature the return of this particular Sontaran, making it the first Sontaran to be a recurring Sontaran, an individual one. So that is really interesting in my opinion. So this story is of course the first Doctor Who story that aired after the magnificent, the gigantic event that is Stolen Earth and Journey's End, which doesn't really get mentioned here. Like the story kind of treats like it's been a while at least. All our characters just seem to be completely fine with the world events. Nothing really gets brought up when it comes to Daleks and stuff like that. So not sure how that plays into the rest of the series. This is actually the first time that I've ever watched this story, watching it for the marathon. So that is really interesting. So shall we get on to it? Of course, let's get into it. So the story starts off with these two scientists, a father and his daughter, Professor Skinner and his daughter, I believe her name is Claire Skinner, and they start seeing these particular lights in the sky, and they go into the forest to try and follow them, but they seemingly start vanishing as something seems to be stalking them, almost like a predator from the movie Predator. So I don't know if that was a call to a nod to this. Now this story, to me personally, feels like a story which would have easily fitted in the wilderness years. There's not a lot of sets, and there's not a lot of location shooting in terms of being in the city with houses and special permissions and stuff. This story feels extremely cheap to make. Not in a bad way. I mean, there are certain things in the story, for example, of course, the Sontaran suit, which looks really professional, coming right off Series 4 Doctor Who. But in terms of the way it's structured, it feels like it's trying to be as cheap as possible. The majority of the story is set in a forest and in an abandoned, it looks like an abandoned building that was used for this story as a skeleton, this telescope thing. So there's not a lot of sets and there's not a lot of various locations. So I feel like this story would have easily fitted in that sort of era. And the Sontarans, who have also appeared in the wilderness story Shakedown, I can't remember, it has a subtitle, something of the Sontarans, but yeah. So this kind of story kind of reminds me of that. I don't know if it was trying on purpose to replicate that kind of feeling. Now, this story is of course the first segment of series 2, and Joss Agnew does a very good job here at directing it. It has that clean cut look that series 1 of Sarah Jane has, and I'm going to presume carries on for the rest of the series. However, the story has a lot more grounded look to it than any other story that has appeared in series 1 of the Sarah Jane Adventures, maybe with the exception of Whatever Happened to Sarah Jane, which is just an absolutely God-sent story. Highly recommended that if you haven't seen it. And so Sarah Jane, she's basically trying to investigate these strange lights in the sky, and she's talking to Mr. Smith, who has a new rebooted personality after the events of The Lost Boy. He is now a completely new sort of individual who he's a little bit more sarcastic, and he's not as reliable as he is in his previous series. The most biggest change in terms of his appearance is that on his screen, his loading screen has now this like liquidy look, which kind of represents him being distant to his original form, because his original screensaver was this crystallized look, which is supposed to represent his crystallized physical body. So that's kind of interesting in terms of the canonicity of Doctor Who. But he doesn't seem to connect these lights in the sky to anything extraterrestrial. And so Sarah Jane doesn't really understand and decides that she's going to go and search and go through this by herself. As she explains, she's still a journalist, so she's going to investigate. But does beg the question, if Sarah Jane is still a journalist, who's she writing this for? Does she still write her missions to the papers? I mean, she can't exactly tell everybody about her alien encounters. What happens to all of those adventures that she can tell people? It's very interesting, isn't it? However, on the other side of the road, you have Maria and Alan talking about an envelope which has just arrived into their house, which is talking about the new job that Alan is getting, something to do with a job in London, which will be specifically a massive promotion. And Maria is basically telling her father to get really excited. There's nothing to worry about. Sure, it might be a big change, but however, how big a change can it be? I mean, we have fought aliens and monsters and the weird world with Sarah Jane. It's going to be no big deal. I mean, we have dealt with far more stranger and bizarre situations than this. This is completely just normal for us. And so Alan reads the letter, and right off the bat we have the storyline of Alan basically learning that he is getting a job in America, that he's got a new job in America, and that if he takes it, him and Maria will have to move to America, and they will not be able to see Sarah Jane and Luke and Clive on a regular basis anymore. So, and that really affects their dynamic. And seeing as Maria has made this massive friendship between the crew on the Bannerman Road, this is a hard struck to with our characters, and so that's like her story throughout the episodes, is that, you know, it's her basically. At the moment, Alan hasn't really decided yet. He's like, this is a really big step for us, and what I do, the job I do, the stuff I do to get paid is for Maria, for my daughter, and so I won't do anything if she isn't happy to. And Maria's like, of course you've got to go. I feel sad, I feel a thing, and it's basically Maria, she's feeling really down by this story, by this events, and so she is trying to work the confidence to tell the rest of the crew, and hopefully they can understand their point of view and Karen and Lovely and appreciate their dynamic. So that is like Maria's point of view. She kind of doesn't want to leave, but at the same time, she knows that she has to. And I like how, right off the bat, that's her point of view. A majority of stories like this, especially for kids programs, would start off their story with Maria. It's like, no, you can't go to America. We got to stay here with Sarah Jane. But Maria does kind of have matured to a point where she does kind of understand that this is a big, big, big opportunity for her father, and that if her father doesn't take it, that is a massive missed opportunity for her father. And so she kind of grudgingly agrees with her father that she should take it, and so she kind of tries to build up the confidence to tell the rest of the crew. And this is all happening while Sarah Jane is investigating these strange lights that appeared in the night before at the Skinner's laboratory, at least near their thing. And so they go to the scientist, and in terms of plot, there's not really much that happens in here. Most of the plot revolves around these two individuals, the father and daughter Skinner scientists, who have this strange dynamic. The daughter seems to have escaped, and she is puzzled by the fact that Sarah Jane, Luke, Clive, and Maria are all at the base, and that it's supposed to be like this private establishment, like people aren't really supposed to be going there. And when the daughter character is like, right, my father's gone in the forest last night, he's been missing ever since, we will go and find him. And so Luke and Clive go looking for Professor Skinner, only for Professor Skinner to arrive, and he's acting very zombie-ish. He doesn't seem any sort of concern, and for his daughter, and is much more like focusing work, and is completely a character alteration from when we've seen him in the pre-credit sequence. And Sarah Jane does get this feeling that this parent doesn't seem like a caring, compassionate person, but he's in some sort of mind control. And I'm trying to think now. Luke and Clive are in the forest, and they get this. They're looking around, and they get this feeling that someone is following them, and so they start running around the forest, only to hit an invisible force field, or at least what they think is a force field. But in actuality, it seems to be a cloaked spaceship, and so they call up Sarah Jane. They meet up in a specific location, where then they take Sarah Jane to find this invisible ship in the forest. Sarah Jane decloaks it, and it turns out it's a Sontaran spaceship. And Sarah Jane I love Sarah Jane's reaction to this, and I love the continuity that's kept throughout the series, because Sarah Jane has met the Sontarans twice before. Once like I said, in her first appearance in The Time Warrior, and the second time in the fourth Doctor story, The Sontaran Experiment. So she is familiar with the Sontarans, but this is now the new series Sontarans, the whole Sontaha. And so we get to learn that the Sontaran has this invisible technology and starts threatening to kill the Sarah Jane team. And I love how confident Sarah Jane, when she first sees it, she's like, no, it can't be. This is terrible. This is horrible. You guys have got to get out of here. We've got to take you back home safe. And I've got to deal with this by myself. She knows the seriousness of the situation. But when she actually encounters the Sontaran, I want to name it Crag. Sarah Jane has this confidence because she knows that the Sontarans are a warrior race that admire this confidence in their enemies, and so can seem to be much more distract them in terms of like the conversation to keep them alive as much as possible. And so she distracts the Sontaran using a device, and they split up and they meet back at the center where the scientist, they basically realize that he is in some sort of being mind controlled by this necklace device. I love there's a little detail where Sarah Jane is just like, that's not like the Sontarans at all. Sontarans usually hypnotize people. Mind control technology is something that's normally above them, which is right, because in the Time Warrior, they did use mind control. So that's some really great continuity right there. It's a small little detail, and I don't think a lot of people would even, like, it'll just go right over people's heads, but that is just some really great little fan service there. But it turns out that this particular Sontaran, at least he describes it, he kind of let them go so that he can kill them all inside the space, inside the laboratory, and so they can stop. He can just destroy them and kill them, and that is actually our cliffhanger of him threatening Sarah Jane with his gun inside the base. So that's the cliffhanger for part one. Really great cliffhanger, set up very well. Joss Agnew's directing, the close-ups very good. Now I want to talk about the Sontaran year, because the Sontaran year, it's very unique in a sense. I love how it constantly belittles the kids, calling them half-lives or what's the word? I believe like bite-size, something like that. And it has this kind of maddening revenge scheme that it's come up with, because we later learn in part two that this is actually a survivor of the Doctor's plan in the Sontaran stratagem and the Poisonous Sky. He was one of the survivors, Sontarans, that we actually get a flashback of the ending of that story when the Sontaran battleship gets destroyed, and you see this lone ship survive and crash onto the Earth. Lovely bit of continuity there. So that's really cool. And so that's the Sontaran in this one, and I really like how much more serious this one is compared to later Sontarans. And I love the conviction in the actor. Now the actor is something I want to talk about here, because the Sontaran in this story is played by none other than Anthony O'Donnell. Yeah, famed actor Anthony O'Donnell plays a Sontaran in a Sarah Jane adventure story. That is absolutely mental, and I find that pretty goddamn funny if you ask me. Famed British actor Anthony O'Donnell playing a Sontaran. I don't know, something about that just cracks me up. He does a fantastic job here, and it wasn't until doing my research that I even figured out it was him. When his name came up in the credits, I was like, holy hell! I did not realize that was him. That is just, that is some really good casting right there. It might be a bit off because it's a very different type of Sontaran portrayal than normally in the Revive series, with Dan Starkey and Christopher Ryan having this much more tight up military confidence, whilst here this Sontaran, who is alone through the majority of adventure, seems a lot more like the Sontarans during the earlier eras of their appearances in Doctor Who, where they're like scientists, like evil scientists in a sense, and they all come up with their own little schemes and plans, and they seem much more personalised, if that makes any sense. So, really great performances here. There's also a great scene I want to talk about where Maria basically tells Sarah Jane, who has got this feeling that Maria is a bit down today, and she hears, and then Maria basically tells Sarah Jane that about what's happening with her and her father, and so Sarah Jane kind of has this almost cold reaction to it. It's like, oh, good, okay, you'll enjoy America, we'll be fine, you know, kind of like brushes it off, and Maria gets upset with it. And I do kind of like this because Sarah Jane is someone who is used to all the danger and putting lives at risk, and so she does kind of feel kind of glad that Maria isn't going to be in these situations anymore, but she also she's not somebody to really show her feelings in that sort of way, and so Maria, this kid, a friend of her son's, who she has this really strong connection with, she's basically learned that this person is now going to leave her life, and Sarah Jane is just like, right, let's cut it off, right, okay, we've got to focus on the job, and Maria is kind of shocked by this. It's like, we were friends for ages, for a long time, and that's the best you can do? It was really upsets her, and so I love that scene. It's a really powerful scene, and I like how in the conclusion of the episode that does get brought up, and the characters do resolve that tension there before they leave. I also like in part 2, Maria calls up her father, and she basically gets Alan to try and work with Mr. Smith to try and work out who the Sontarans are, what's their weaknesses, what's the plans and stuff. Even though I don't think you really needed that, because you could have had a scene where Sarah Jane explains the weaknesses of the Sontarans. She should know what the weaknesses of the Sontarans are because of her previous experiences. But I guess it gives Mr. Smith something to do. But Alan basically becomes a big part in part 2, in which he and Maria's mother, he basically explains to her that all these monsters and aliens exist. And I love how Maria's mother, she's so eager, she's always desperate to try and figure out what's going on with Maria and the Sarah Jane crew. When Alan is like, there's aliens, they fight aliens on a regular basis, and now our daughter's in danger, so we need to save them. Maria's mother is just like, I can tell you're not lying because you've got like a twitch, and you didn't do the twitch, and you're telling the truth. Well, come on then, what are we doing standing here for? Maria needs our help, come on! And so they go chasing after that. It does kind of feel out of character for Maria's mother to just get into the adventure. She seems like the type of person throughout the majority of Series 1 where when she discovers, if she discovered all of this alien stuff, she would have a much more, like, how dare you, a reaction to it. How dare you put our daughter in such a vulnerable state, kind of thing. She seems to be like overprotective because of her previous reactions to Sarah Jane. But I guess it does kind of nice to see all of our characters just getting along to bat this common threat, which is, of course, the Sontarans. And so Sarah Jane basically tries to figure out what's going on. Sarah Jane gets taken prisoner with Claire. I think her name is Claire, the daughter scientist, as Luke, Maria, and Clive basically come up with this plan to not only save Sarah Jane, but also try and turn off the satellite system because the Sontaran needs it for some reason. And so you all this like massive chase scenes. There's a lot of great shots, a great corridor running around, which is a bit cliched for Doctor Who. And there's a lot of great scenes where characters are being chased through. Where characters are being chased through the forest. Now, again, this is what reminds me of those really cheap Wilderness Years movies. Like, it seems like something which would easily fit in that era. And when I was watching the story and seeing this monsters running around the forest and stuff. It did kind of make me feel really nostalgic for those past stories in Classic Who and the Wilderness years where things had that really, again, I don't want to use the word cheap, but very, like, you can see how it's made, and it has a very, right, let's just get on and do it sort of attitude in terms of just how it feels in terms of a production company. And it's done very well here, and it does make you kind of appreciate it a bit more. Maybe I think that might be a bit more personal thing. I feel like for those who don't have that sort of connection, who isn't used to these much more slower action scenes with very familiar kind of thing, that they could get easily bored by this. But again, I think that's much more of a personal thing, and I think my nostalgia of these kind of stories, I was kind of like, I recognise that play clip of Robert De Niro watching the TV, pointing the screen from the Hollywood film. So yeah, so it all culminates in this conclusion where the Sontaran is like basically explains that he is a survivor of the Doctor destroying the Atmos process, and I love how Sarah Jane learns here that this was where the Doctor was interacted with the situations of Atmos, and that the Sontarans were also part of the Atmos world global threat. Because remember, everybody knows about Atmos. It was a world pandemic, a world threat, but not everybody. Only a handful of people actually knew that the Doctor, Unit, and Sontarans were involved in that event. So, again, this series has some great. This story has a great continuity checklist here, and I like how this is the event where Sarah Jane learns that this Sontaran has a particular grudge against the Doctor because it was the Doctor that basically made it in its vulnerable state, and we get to learn that it gave it this scar on its face when it was crashing down to Earth, and it blames the Doctor for everything. And so after it destroys Earth, it will destroy the Doctor. And even though Earth has no real strategic plan in the war efforts of the Sontarans, it's basically like just wants to get its revenge and tries to wipe the Sontarans' defeat of Earth from the history books. I also love how Sarah Jane is like, I've seen the Sontarans in the future, millions and millions and millions of years in the future, and I know your war with the Rutons does not end for millennia, but that probably doesn't bother you because you're all about the fight anyway. And the Sontarans is like, wait, you know about the future, you know about the Doctor, and that our war continues for millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of years. A reference, of course, to the Sontaran experiment. So that's a very cool dynamic there. And the Sontaran also basically reveals its plan in a very mustache-twirling event where the villain basically explains its plan, which I do feel is kind of weak. Like, the scene clearly plays out. It's like, ha! I've got you in my grasp. So let me tell you about my plan, because there's no way that you can defeat me. Ha 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 ha. And Maria's parents get involved and try to fix the computers and stuff. Oh no, wait. I'm over tracking a bit. The Sontaran basically reveals that Claire Skinner, again I think her name is Claire, she is actually a secret agent. She has actually got this necklace which will allow the Sontaran to mind control her and use her to basically push the plan. And the plan is that this satellite can gain control of all satellites of Earth, and he plans to make these satellites all crash down to Earth in particular locations of nuclear reactors, making Earth basically uninhabitable. And that's a pretty good, decent plan. And I like how Clive is like, hold on, satellites fall to Earth every time. They either burn up in the atmosphere or get crash landed into the sea. And Sarah Jane is like, yeah, but we guide them to the sea. I don't think the Sontaran has that particular plan. And so Maria's mother actually like comes in and smashes the Sontaran's probic vent with the shoe, with her high heel shoe, basically revealing that this fame, well, not fame, but this glamour that she has is nothing compared to the safety of her daughter. A very poignant scene, and I like how it also connects to a previous scene where she learns about the Sontarans in Mr. Smith's basement, and so something happens where she gets an electric shock. I can't remember how she gets the electric shock, but basically it knocks her out, and Maria and Alan basically pretend that that her mother basically dreamt up the whole thing. There's also a really great scene that I absolutely love where Maria is talking to Luke and they're trying to stop the Sontaran ship from. They're trying to get make this particular gas that will knock out the Sontaran using the Sontaran's ship technology. And Maria basically explains to Luke that she has to go away to America. And Luke, because remember, Luke's been with Maria since he was born, essentially. He's only known life with Maria, and so he is the one that's really defensive of her going and is like, no, you've got to stay with us. You can't leave. And this kind of breaks them, like there's this like really emotional attachment between the two characters. There's this friendship, this bond, especially with Luke, because he's kind of surrogating her, like kind of looks up to her, and so because he uses her to see life as normal, and so Luke is like, no, you can't. Maria's like, no, I've got to for my father, and I'm gonna miss you all. I really miss you, but you can save the world without me. You'll be okay, Luke. Honest, promise. And so they kind of make it up in that scene, and so the Sontaran gets, when it wakes and Sarah Jane is like, you're defeated, and with your honor, the Sontaran, we will let you onto your spaceship, and we will let you fly off, we'll let you fly out, go back to your scars. We won't kill you, we won't take you as prisoner, we just want you to leave. And the Sontarans is like, I will leave, and I will leave you in peace, but I will not forget you, Sarah Jane, and I will come back. Obviously setting him up as a recurring Sontaran, one of the only recurring Sontaran villains of the series, and so really cool. So the story then ends with, of course, Maria and Sarah Jane hashing out their differences, and Maria is basically apologising for basically having this outburst, but then Sarah Jane also apologises because it's like, no, I did kind of have this cold reaction. I don't want you to leave, and I have this kind of connection with you, and the two girls then like make it up, and it's just a really powerful, poignant moment that really brings home the leave-in of Yasmin Page to the cast, and so the story ends. I think they said 2 months later, when they're packing and they're in the car and they're all waving goodbye to each other, and that is the end of Maria's as a regular character. She would later on appear again in series 2, but not as a recurring companion of Sarah Jane. So that is kind of sad, but and of course Alan, who I think also returns as well. But this is also the last definitive appearance of Maria's mother as a cast member. So that's something to noteworthy about. And so there you go. That's The Last Sontaran. Overall, it's a lot of fun. There's some really great moments. I really like the stuff with Maria. Yasmin Page, Joseph Millson give some of their best performance. I love how Alan's much more poignant into the stories. That's something I've brought up in previous Sarah Jane Adventure videos. I wish Alan had more interactions. He seemed like a great cast member, and I'm glad that in his last regular appearance, he still had felt like a part of the crew. Like, he is the second adult member of the Bannerman Road crew at this point in the series. And there's a lot to like here. There's absolutely a lot to like. The new Sontaran is really cool. Sarah Jane's reaction with the Sontaran is really cool. But I feel like, apart from the fact that it's really fun and enjoyable, there's nothing really gritty here to bite your teeth in. For the majority of the plot, it's a lot more fun, it's great, but there's nothing really the story's trying to say. It's something that you will enjoy. When you finish the story, you will have fond memories remembering it, but I doubt it'll be anyone's favourite. It seems, not cliche, a bit too mainstream maybe fits too much into the status quo of how Doctor Who stories should play out, and so it's nothing I can really, not that I don't recommend it, but apart from the fact that it's just a really fun story, there's nothing really much going for it. And if I had to judge it, I would say it's like a 7, maybe a 6 out of 10. Still good, great story, just could have been a lot better. Nothing particularly bad, but it feels a little bit hollow, with the exceptions of Maria's scenes. Sorry, my phone is going off. So that's the last of the Sontaran. The last Sontaran. That's really bad. So join me next time, where Sarah Jane and the crew are going to come up with one of the most greatest fears of humankind. So I'll see you next time for the day of the clown. And I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra!